Thank you for doing that. A man's daughter asked to have the new associate pastor at their parish come to pray with her father. When the priest arrived, he found the man lying in the bed. He was bedridden. His head was propped up on 2 pillows, and there was an empty chair sitting beside his bed. The priest just assumed that the old fellow had been informed of his visit and set the chair out for him. "I guess you were expecting me," the priest said. "No," the man replied. "Who are you?" He said, "Well, I'm the new associate pastor at the church. When I saw the empty chair, I just figured you knew that I would be showing up." "Oh, the chair," the man said. "Would you mind closing the door for a minute?" Puzzled, the priest went ahead and closed the door. "I've never told anyone about this, not even my daughter," said the man. "But all my life, I've never known how to pray. At church, I used to hear the priest talk about prayer, but it always went right over my head. And so I abandoned any attempt at prayer years ago. Until one day, about 4 years ago, my best friend said to me, 'Joe, prayer is simply a matter of having a conversation with Jesus. Here's what I suggest. Place an empty chair by your bed and just imagine that Jesus is sitting in that chair, and then speak to him just as we are speaking to each other right now.'" He continued, "So I tried it, and I liked it so much that I do it a couple of hours every day. I'm careful though," he said, "I'm careful. If my daughter saw me talking to an empty chair, she might think I had a nervous breakdown and send me to the funny farm." The young priest was deeply moved by the story and encouraged the old guy to continue on that journey. Then he prayed with him, anointed him, and returned to the church. 2 nights later, the daughter called the priest to tell her that her daddy had died that afternoon. "Did he seem to die in peace?" the young priest asked. "Yes," she said. "When I left the house around 2 o'clock, he called me over to his bedside, told me one of his corny jokes, and then kissed me on the cheek. When I got back from the store an hour later, he was gone." Then she said, "But there was something strange. When I found him, his head was resting on the chair that was beside his bed." I don't know where I heard that story. I found it on the or where it came from, but I found it on the internet, and I liked it immediately, and I kind of filed it under prayer, just waiting for the right time to use it. Today's gospel tells us, rising very early before dawn, Jesus left and went off to a deserted place where he prayed. There's something very special about Jesus and prayer. I don't know how many times exactly it says in the Bible that Jesus went off to pray, but I know that it's often. This weekend and next, we are beginning our stewardship of our time. How do we steward our time? How do we take care of the time that God has allotted to us? So when you hear that phrase, stewardship of time, I hope you immediately begin to think, how are you using your time to grow your faith? Our theme for this year's stewardship talks are ingratitude. For stewardship of time, in gratitude, we pray. For stewardship of talent, in gratitude, we serve. And for stewardship of treasure, in gratitude, we give. So this week and next, I want to share with you some thoughts about prayer that come to us out of the scriptures. Because I think like many of us, or like the man in the story, I think many of us find it hard sometimes to really understand how to pray. If that's you, don't worry about it. I think God has given us enough lessons from the scriptures that I hope 1 or 2 of them will resonate with you over the next 2 weeks. One of the things that the Bible teaches us is that we have to make time for prayer. And there's no right time or no wrong time to pray. In today's gospel, Jesus got up very early in the morning and went out to pray. But in Matthew chapter 14, he prays in the evening. It was evening. Jesus had just fed the 5,000. He tells his apostles to get into a boat and precede him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. And then Matthew writes, after doing so, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. Morning, afternoon, evening, it doesn't really matter. But what does matter is that we make the time to pray. Now, one of the ways you can make the time to pray is to attend our upcoming Alpha series. If you're not comfortable with your prayer life, Alpha maybe can help jumpstart that. Not only that, but Alpha can help you build relationships. both those you already have and new relationships that God might have in store for you in your life. Alpha is 11 weeks, beginning February 21st, morning and evening sessions. Each week consists of a meal together, watching a video, and then having some discussion in a judgment-free atmosphere. But to set aside 11 weeks to deepen your relationship with God is a true commitment of wanting more out of your life. So the first thing you need to do if you want a better prayer life is make time to pray. One of the other things Jesus teaches us about prayer is that prayer needs to be sincere. It really doesn't matter how you pray as long as you're sincere in your prayer. As I said, there's no right or wrong time to pray. There's no right or wrong way to pray either, unless you're praying simply to get attention. Jesus says this in Matthew's gospel, "When you pray, do not be like the hypocrites who love to stand and pray in synagogues and on street corners so that others may see that they are praying." It doesn't matter how you pray, as long as you're sincere in your prayer. There was a story told about a woman who was leading a Bible study. At the end of one of the day's programs, she asked someone if any of them would like to lead the closing prayer. A woman who was pretty shy volunteered, and she stumbled her way through the prayer as best she could. When she finished, the woman who organized the Bible study pulled her aside and told her several ways that she could improve her prayer, to which the woman replied, "I wasn't talking to you." Make time to pray. Be sincere in your prayer. And number 3, pray for God's help. And pray during the hard times in your life. Jesus on the cross prayed. And these were the white knuckle prayers that he prayed. My God, why have you abandoned me? Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. I thirst. Simply calling out to God at that time, simply calling out to God in pain, is a prayer. In Matthew 26:41, when the disciples fell asleep as Jesus was praying in the garden, he told them, "Watch and pray that you may not undergo the test." In other words, in hard times, turn to God in prayer. And finally, at least for today, pray when God asks you to do something difficult. When Jesus went to raise Lazarus, before he called out to Lazarus, he prayed. He had made it to the tomb. He tells them to roll away the stone. They do that, and then this is John 11:41, and Jesus raised his eyes and said, "Father, I thank you for hearing me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd I have said this, that they might believe that you sent me." That little prayer before he cries out in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." So, when God asks you to do something difficult, pray. So there they are, 4 lessons from Jesus about prayer. Set aside some time, be sincere, pray for God's help and pray during hard times, and pray when God asks you to do something difficult. Jesus' entire ministry was rooted in prayer, and that's a lesson for us. So join us back next week as we continue this deep dive into prayer, and join us next week as together in gratitude we pray.